Imagine the creaking silence of a forgotten mansion, where shadows whisper secrets to the walls, and the air hangs heavy with the ghosts of laughter long faded. In the heart of this crumbling empire of marble and gold, a little girl named Elara wanders alone, her tiny footsteps echoing like thunder in the vast empty halls. She's only 10, but her eyes carry the weight of a lifetime. Her father, the ruthless millionaire who built this fortress of isolation, vanished one stormy night, leaving her his sole heir to a fortune that feels more like a curse. The world outside has forgotten her, or perhaps it never knew she existed, tucked away in this gilded cage high on the hill, where the wind howls through cracked windows like a mournful lullaby. Elara drifts from room to room, her small hands tracing the dust-covered portraits of a family that once seemed unbreakable. There's her mother, smiling eternally from a frame, lost to illness years ago, and her father, stern and unyielding, his gaze piercing even in paint. She pauses at the grand dining hall, where a single candle flickers on a table meant for dozens. She sits there, nibbling on stale bread from the pantry, the chandelier above swaying gently as if mocking her solitude. "Why did you leave me, Papa?" she murmurs to the empty chair across from her, her voice barely a whisper swallowed by the void. The mansion groans in response, its ancient bones settling under the weight of unspoken regrets. Outside, the moon casts eerie silver light through the fogged glass, illuminating the overgrown gardens where roses have turned to thorns, choking the life from what was once beautiful. Nights like this stretch on forever, blending into days where Elara imagines voices in the corridors, perhaps the servants who fled after her father's disappearance, or maybe just the house itself, alive with memories it refuses to share. She climbs the sweeping staircase, her nightgown trailing like a specter, and peers out from the highest turret, scanning the dark horizon for any sign of rescue. But the gates remain locked, the world beyond a distant dream. In her room, surrounded by toys gathering dust and books with pages yellowed by time, she curls up under heavy blankets, listening to the rain patter against the roof like fingers tapping impatiently. Will anyone ever come? She wonders, her heart aching with a loneliness that seeps into her bones colder than the stone floors. Yet tonight feels different, the air thicker, charged with an unseen presence. As Elara lies there, eyes wide in the dim glow of her lantern, a faint sound cuts through the silence. Soft, insistent knocks at the massive front door, echoing up from below like a heartbeat awakening in the dead of night. If you felt that chill run down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe for more haunting tales that pull you in and never let go. The knocks grew louder, insistent against the heavy oak door, cutting through the storm's relentless roar like a desperate plea from the abyss. Elara froze in her bed, her heart pounding in rhythm with the thunder that shook the mansion's foundations. Rain lashed the windows, blurring the world outside into a watery veil. But those knocks, they were real, alive, pulling her from the suffocating grip of isolation. With trembling hands, she clutched her lantern, its flame dancing wildly as she descended the creaking staircase, each step echoing her unspoken fears and fragile hopes. The mansion, once a tomb of silence, now hummed with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and something unfamiliar, humanity perhaps, invading her solitary realm. She reached the grand foyer, the lantern's glow casting long, wavering shadows across the marble floors slick with condensation. "Who's there?" Elara called out, her voice small and quivering, barely audible over the gale. No answer came at first, only the wind's howl and the patter of rain. Then, a muffled voice pierced the barrier. "Please, miss, we're caught in the storm. Just shelter for the night, we mean no harm." It was a man's voice, roughened by hardship, laced with exhaustion. Elara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the brass latch. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind. Strangers are thieves in disguise. The world devours the weak. But the loneliness clawed at her soul, a beast far more terrifying than any intruder. With a deep breath, she unbolted the door, swinging it open to the fury of the night. 3 figures huddled on the threshold, drenched and shivering, their forms silhouetted against the flashing lightning. First was a couple, their clothes ragged and muddied, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. The man, tall and gaunt with a beard streaked in gray, nodded gratefully, water dripping from his brimmed hat. Beside him stood a woman, her face etched with lines of sorrow. Eyes hollow yet kind, wrapped in a tattered shawl that did little to ward off the cold. Trailing behind was a lone traveler, younger, with sharp features and a backpack slung over one shoulder, his coat torn at the seams. They stepped inside, bringing the storm with them, puddles forming at their feet, the chill seeping into the warmth of the foyer. Elara closed the door with a resounding thud, sealing them in together. "Thank you, child," the woman said softly, her voice warm like forgotten hearth fires, as she knelt to Elara's level. "I'm Clara, this is my husband Elias, and that's Thorn over there. We've been walking for days, lost in this cursed weather." Elara studied them, her curiosity battling caution. They looked weary, not wicked. Clara's smile reached her eyes. Elias's hands were calloused from labor. And Thorn kept his distance, murmuring a quiet, "Much obliged." She led them to the sitting room, where faded velvet chairs gathered dust around a cold fireplace. With fumbling hands, she lit a fire, the flames crackling to life, casting flickering light that danced across their faces, revealing scars and stories untold. As they warmed themselves, fragments of their lives spilled out in hushed tones, drawn forth by Elara's innocent questions. "Where are you from?" she asked, perching on the edge of a chair, her eyes wide with wonder. Elias leaned forward, his voice gravelly. "We were farmers once down in the valleys, but the floods took everything. Our home, our crops, even our little boy." His words hung heavy, the pain raw, and Clara reached for his hand, tears glistening. "We fled the ruins, searching for a new start, but the roads are unkind to the broken." Thorn, staring into the fire, added his own shadow. "I'm a wanderer, miss. Lost my way after a betrayal that cost me everything I held dear. Partner who turned on me, left me for dead in the wilds." His eyes flickered with something darker, a glint of unresolved anger that made Elara's skin prickle. The mansion, so long devoid of voices, now echoed with their forced laughter as Clara shared a light tale of better days, her chuckles brittle against the storm's rage. Elara felt a spark ignite within her, a tentative warmth, the illusion of companionship wrapping around her like a blanket. She fetched blankets and bread from the kitchen, her movements eager, her heart swelling with the novelty of sharing. "My papa was rich," she blurted out suddenly, unable to contain her excitement at having an audience. "He left me this whole place, with treasures hidden everywhere. Gold, jewels, secrets in the walls." The words tumbled forth, innocent and trusting, painting her as the keeper of untold wealth. In that moment, as the fire popped and the wind moaned, Elias and Clara exchanged a glance, subtle, fleeting, but loaded with unspoken intent. Thorn's gaze sharpened, lingering on the opulent tapestries and silver candelabras. Elara didn't notice, lost in the glow of their presence, but the air shifted, charged with a mystery that whispered of hidden motives, of shadows lengthening in the light of false hope. As the storm subsided into a drizzling hush, the mansion transformed under the stranger's tentative touch, its cold halls flickering with the fragile light of newfound routine. Elara woke to the aroma of sizzling bacon wafting from the kitchen, a scent she hadn't known since her father's rare indulgences, drawn downstairs by the clatter of pots and the murmur of voices. Clara stood at the stove, her sleeves rolled up, stirring a makeshift stew from pantry remnants while Elias chopped wood outside, his axe echoing like a heartbeat reviving the estate. Thorn lingered in the shadows, repairing a loose shutter with quiet efficiency, his eyes occasionally darting toward hidden corners as if mapping secrets. "Good morning, little one," Clara greeted with a smile that crinkled her weary face, setting a plate before Elara. The food was simple, warmed by fire and care, and as Elara bit into it, a warmth spread through her chest, melting the ice of her isolation. Days blurred into a tapestry of forged bonds, woven with threads of laughter and lingering darkness. In the overgrown garden, where vines strangled statues of forgotten grandeur, They played games that bridged their worlds. Elias teaching Elara to skip stones across a murky pond, his stories of lost harvests turning into lessons on resilience. "Life takes, but it gives back in unexpected ways," he'd say. His voice gravelly, eyes distant as if recalling ghosts. Clara braided Elara's hair by the fireside, humming lullabies that twisted into tales of betrayal. A king who abandoned his queen for gold. A brother who sold his sibling for power. "Families aren't always blood, dear," Clara whispered one evening, her fingers gentle yet firm. "Sometimes they're the ones who choose you in the storm." Elara leaned into her, the words a balm on her aching heart, igniting a spark of belonging she hadn't felt since her mother's embrace. Yet shadows crept into these moments, subtle as the fog rolling down the hills. During a game of hide-and-seek in the dusty attic, Thorn stumbled upon a loose floorboard, revealing a velvet pouch of glittering jewels, her father's hidden stash, emeralds and diamonds winking like trapped stars. He paused, fingers hovering, his breath catching as greed flickered in his eyes. Elara, peeking from behind a trunk, watched him slip one gem into his pocket before replacing the board with a forced smile. "Found you," he called, but his voice carried an edge, a hunger that made her stomach twist. Later, in the library stacked with leather-bound tomes yellowed by time, Elias pored over old maps of the estate, his mutterings about buried fortunes, blending with casual chatter. "We're your family now, small one," he declared one night over candlelit supper, his gaze intense. "The world out there is cruel. It chews up the lonely and spits out bones. Stick with us, and you'll never want for anything." Elara's days filled with these echoes of kinship, baking lopsided cookies with Clara, their flour-dusted laughter filling the air, exploring the basement's cobwebbed relics with Thorn, where he shared cryptic anecdotes of his wandering life, always skirting the full truth. The mansion breathed easier, its creaks softening into sighs, as if approving this makeshift clan. But doubt nibbled at Elara's edges. Why did Clara's hugs feel possessive, like chains disguised as comfort? Why did Elias's questions about her father's will probe deeper each time? In quiet moments she wandered alone, tracing the portraits, whispering to her painted parents for guidance. One twilight, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Elara slipped into the guest room where the strangers slept. Rifling through Thorn's backpack for a borrowed book, her fingers brushed something sharp, a torn photograph, edges frayed like a wound. In it, a family smiled. Thorn with a woman and child, their faces radiant, but the image was ripped down the middle, as if severing a painful past. Her heart raced. Who were they, really, and what had brought them here? What secrets do you think that photo hides? Share in the comments below. The mansion's air grew heavier as twilight draped its velvet cloak over the hills, the flickering candles casting jagged shadows that danced like specters across the peeling wallpaper. Elara's small frame huddled in the library, her fingers clutching the torn photograph from Thorn's bag, its jagged edges a silent scream of hidden truths. The faces in the image haunted her. Thorn, younger, smiling with a warmth that felt foreign to the guarded man now sleeping under her roof. The woman and child beside him, their eyes bright with love, seemed to whisper accusations from a life erased. Elara's heart thudded, torn between the fragile family she'd woven with these strangers and the creeping dread that their presence was no accident. The house itself seemed to watch, its creaks sharper, as if urging her to unravel the threads before they tightened into a noose. Days had passed since the strangers arrived, their routines embedding into the mansion's rhythm like ivy creeping up stone. But now, cracks appeared in their warmth. Clara's laughter, once a balm, carried a brittle edge when Elara asked about their past, her deflections quick and polished. "Oh, darling, the world out there is no place for stories. It only brings pain." Elias, meanwhile, lingered too long near locked cabinets, his questions about the mansion's hidden rooms growing pointed. "Your father was clever, wasn't he? Always hiding things," he'd said one evening, his smile not reaching his eyes. Thorn was the quietest, his sharp gaze tracking Elara as she moved, like a hunter sizing up prey. The warmth of their early days soured, replaced by an undercurrent of secrecy, that made the air taste of ash. Late one night, unable to sleep, Elara crept through the shadowed corridors, her lantern a trembling beacon. The mansion groaned underfoot, its ancient boards betraying her steps as she neared the guest quarters. Voices drifted from behind a cracked door, low, urgent, laced with venom. "The brat's too trusting," Elias hissed, his tone cold as the stone walls. "She mentioned a vault in the west wing, gold enough to set us free." Clara's voice followed, softer but sharp. "We play the family card a little longer, then we take what's ours. She'll never know." Thorn's murmur cut through, chilling Elara to her core. "I worked for her father once, built this cursed place with my own hands. He ruined us all, fired us, left us to rot. This is justice." The words landed like blows, shattering the fragile hope Elara had clung to. Flashbacks flooded her mind. Not hers, but theirs, conjured by their bitter words. Elias and Clara, once loyal groundskeepers, cast out after her father's ruthless cost-cutting. Thorn, a carpenter whose dreams were crushed under her father's ambition. They weren't strangers, they were ghosts of her father's sins, come to claim retribution. Elara stumbled back, the lantern clattering to the floor, its flame snuffing out in a puff of smoke. Her breath hitched, the darkness swallowing her as the weight of betrayal pressed against her chest. They had eaten her food, shared her stories, braided her hair, all while plotting to strip her bare. The mansion, once her prison, now felt like a battlefield, its opulence a trap baited with her innocence. She ran, bare feet slapping against cold marble toward the west wing, where moonlight spilled through cracked windows, illuminating a locked door she'd never dared open, her father's vault, the heart of their greed. As she fumbled with a rusted key, footsteps echoed behind her, slow and deliberate, like predators closing in. She turned, heart pounding, to face the silhouette of Elias in the doorway, his eyes glinting with something darker than the night. The mansion trembled under the storm's renewed fury, its walls groaning as if mourning the betrayal unfolding within. Rain hammered the roof, a relentless drumbeat matching the frantic rhythm of Elara's heart as she stood frozen before the vault's iron door, the rusted key biting into her palm. Elias's silhouette loomed in the moonlit corridor, his eyes glinting with a hunger that stripped away the warmth of their shared meals and laughter. "You shouldn't be here, little one," he said, his voice low, laced with a menace that made the air feel like a blade against her skin. The shadows of Clara and Thorn emerged behind him, their faces unreadable, a jury of strangers who had worn the mask of family. Elara's breath caught, her small body trembling, yet something fierce sparked within her, a defiance born of abandonment, sharpened by the sting of their deceit. She turned and bolted, her bare feet slipping on the slick marble as she fled toward the grand staircase, the key clutched like a lifeline. The strangers pursued, their footsteps a thunderous echo through the cavernous halls, the mansion itself seeming to conspire with them, its creaking doors and flickering lights closing in around her. Elara's mind raced, piecing together their whispered plans. The vault, the gold, her father's legacy they meant to steal. She darted through the dining hall, past the table where they'd shared bread, and out into the storm-soaked garden, where thorns tore at her nightgown. The rain blinded her, plastering her hair to her face, but she pushed toward the mansion's crumbling tower, its silhouette a jagged scar against the lightning-streaked sky. If she could reach the roof, she could hide, maybe escape through the old servant's path her father once mentioned. The tower stairs spiraled upward, slick with moss and time, each step a gamble as she climbed, the strangers' voices growing closer. "Elara, stop! We're not what you think," Clara called, her tone desperate, almost convincing, but the memory of their plotted betrayal burned too brightly. At the top, the roof opened to the storm's full wrath, wind howling like a banshee, rain stinging her skin. Elara stumbled to the edge, the drop to the gardens below a dizzying void. Lightning illuminated the trio as they reached the rooftop, their figures blurred by the downpour. "We just want to talk," Thorn said, his hands raised, but his eyes flicked to the key in her hand, betraying his intent. Elias stepped closer, his face a mask of false concern. But Clara hesitated, her expression fracturing. Guilt, perhaps, or something deeper. "You lied to me," Elara screamed, her voice raw, carried by the wind. "You're not my family, you're thieves." The words tore from her, each one a shard of her shattered trust. Clara flinched, tears mingling with rain, and took a step forward. "Elara, we didn't mean it to go this far. You reminded me of my own girl, lost to us." Her voice broke, but Elara shook her head, backing closer to the edge, the key slipping in her wet grip. A gust rocked her, her foot sliding on the slick stone, and she teetered, the abyss yawning below. Thorn lunged, his hand catching her wrist, pulling her back from the brink. His grip was firm, his eyes conflicted. Anger, shame, or something softer warring within them. "Don't do this, kid," he whispered, rain streaming down his face. Elara stared into his eyes, searching for truth, but the storm's roar drowned out her thoughts, leaving only the question of whether salvation or betrayal held her now. The storm's fury dwindled to a mournful drizzle, its final tears seeping into the mansion's cracked foundations as Elara stood trembling on the rooftop, Thorn's hand still gripping her wrist, anchoring her to life. His eyes, once sharp with greed, now flickered with a raw, unspoken remorse, as if the storm had washed away his mask. Below, Clara's sobs mingled with the wind, her silhouette slumped against Elias, who stood rigid, his face a battlefield of shame and defiance. The key to the vault, cold and heavy, slipped from Elara's fingers, clattering onto the wet stone, its promise of wealth meaningless against the weight of her shattered trust. The mansion loomed behind them, its Gothic spires piercing the sky, a monument to her father's sins and her own loneliness now teetering on the edge of collapse. Lightning flashed, illuminating the truth. These strangers, bound to her by betrayal, had become the closest thing to family she'd known since her world unraveled. Thorn released her, stepping back, his hands falling limp. "Go," he whispered, voice hoarse, rain streaking his face like tears he couldn't shed. "We're no good for you." Clara choked out a plea. "Elara, I swear you meant something to us." But Elias's silence was louder, his eyes fixed on the key, greed still smoldering beneath his guilt. Elara's gaze swept over them, her heart a tangled knot of longing and loss. She turned, fleeing down the tower's spiraling stairs, her footsteps echoing like a fading heartbeat. The mansion groaned, and as she reached the foyer, a spark from the neglected fireplace caught the ancient curtains, flames licking upward with hungry intent. Smoke curled through the halls, a final act of rebellion from a house burdened by secrets. Elara stumbled into the garden, the mansion's glow behind her painting the night in shades of orange and ash. She clutched a single memento, a letter she'd found in Clara's shawl, slipped into her pocket during the chaos. It was written in a hurried scrawl, confessing the stranger's past. Her father's cruelty had stripped them of their livelihoods, their families, their hope. "He broke us," Clara had written, "but you, Elara, reminded us of what we lost. Forgive us." The words burned hotter than the fire consuming her home, each one a mirror reflecting her own fractured soul. She sank to her knees among the thorny roses, the mansion's collapse a thunderous requiem, its embers drifting skyward like stars escaping a dying world. Alone again, yet not the same, Elara felt a quiet strength stir within her, forged in the crucible of betrayal and fleeting warmth. As dawn broke, painting the horizon in hues of bruised purple, Elara stood, the letter crumpled in her fist. The gates of the estate, rusted and forgotten, creaked open under her touch, revealing a world she'd only glimpsed from turret windows. The road stretched ahead, vast and uncertain, whispering of freedom and peril. She stepped forward, her small figure swallowed by the mist, carrying the weight of her father's legacy and the stranger's broken promises. The mansion's ashes settled behind her, a testament to endings and beginnings, leaving her to forge her own path where family wasn't found in blood or deceit, but in the echoes of her own resilience. If this tale of loss and hope stirred your soul, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that linger long after the screen fades to black.